is going to speak today. With that, over to you, JayaSubhadra.
Hare Krishna devotees. Thank you for joining the Sunday Feast program. And we'll start with the class. So first of all, Satya Sai, would you be able to do Jai Radha Madhava? We'll start.
Sure, I will. You can repeat, JayaSubhadra.
Yeah.
Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari.
Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari.
Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana.
Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana.
Yamuna Tira Vanachari.
Yamuna Tira Vanachari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama.
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva.
Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva.
Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol.
Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol.
Shri Radha Nila Madhav Bhagwan ki
Jai.
Shri Radha Damodar Bhagwan ki
Jai.
Shri Radha Madhav Bhagwan ki jai.
Jai.
Gauranitai ki jai.
Jai.
Lakshmana Shingadev Bhagwan ki jai.
Jai.
Shri Prahlad Maharaj ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Gurudev ki jai.
Jai.
Gaur Premanande. Hare
Hare
Hare.
Krishna.
Over to you, JayaSubhadra.
Okay. So, Prabhu, can you display the verse, today's verse? Thank you. So today we are going to discuss this verse from 18th chapter, Bhagavad-Gita 18th chapter, verse number 60. We'll start with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya first, and then we'll recite the verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. स्वभावजेन कौन्तेय निबद्धसेवना कर्मणा कर्तुं निच्छासि यन्मोहात् करिष्यासि यवसोऽपि तत्. Repeat two more times. स्वभावजेन कौन्तेय निबद्धसेवना कर्मणा कर्तुं निच्छासि यन्मोहात् करिष्यासि यवसोऽपि तत्. स्वभावजेन कौन्तेय निबद्धसेवेना कर्मणा कर्तुं नेच्छासि यन्मोहात् करिष्यासि यवसोऽपि तत्. We'll have three people recite, three devotees, one Mataji Prabhu and one kid.
I can do Mataji.
Okay.
स्वभावजेन कौन्तेय निबद्धः स्वेन कर्मणा कर्तुं नेच्छासि यन्मोहात् करिष्यसि अवसोऽपि तत्.
Thank you, Mataji. One Prabhu.
स्वभावजेन कौन्तेय निबद्ध स्वेन कर्मणा कर्तुं नेच्छसि यन्मोहात् करिष्यसि अवसोऽपि तत्.
Thank you, Prabhu. And any kids online?
स्वभावजेन कौन्तेय निबद्धस्वेन कर्मणा कर्तुं निच्छासि यन्मोहात् करिष्यसि अवसोऽपि तत्.
Thank you, Samanvita. Okay. So the translation and purport, which we'll read by Srila Prabhupada. Translation is, under the illusion you are now declining to act under my direction, but compelled by the work born of your own nature, you will act all the same, O son of Kunti. Let me see if I can read the purport quickly. It's a very short purport by Srila Prabhupada. If one refuses to act under the direction of the Supreme Lord, then he is compelled to act by the modes in which he is situated. Everyone is under the spell of a particular combination of the modes of nature and is acting in that way. But anyone who voluntarily engages himself under the direction of the Supreme Lord becomes glorious. So I'll just say prayers first. Om Agyanati Miranjasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukum Karati Vachalam Pankam Laktem Kirim Yat Kripataham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So basically the format of this class would be, we'll discuss this verse, half of the time of the class we'll discuss this verse, and then it was last Monday, just passed on 24th May, was Jayananda Prabhu's disappearance day, and as instructed by Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada instructed that we should celebrate his disappearance day just as we do for any acharyas. So many of us may not be familiar of who is Jayananda Prabhu. We'll talk about him a little bit also, half of the class maybe. So that's how we'll finish this class of 1 hour. So this is a very this verse is very apt for us, because Krishna here in this verse, and it's a series of verses. This is the last part of this series from 56 through 60. Krishna has a theme, and that theme is that act, work with pure devotional service. So we all are stuck here in this material world, and we all have to act or work basically to keep our body and soul together, right? So what is that art of working? And what happens when we don't follow what the direction given by Krishna here? What is the result? So again, Krishna says in the translation, he's saying, under illusion, you are now declining to act according to my direction, but compelled by the work born of your own nature, you will act all the same. Very interesting verse, because Krishna, in the chapter 18, first of all, chapter 18 is basically a summary of the entire 17, all the 17 chapters, right? Here, Krishna is basically summarizing everything, what he has spoken about. So in this chapter, Krishna is explaining meanings of renunciation, the effects the modes will have on us, the modes of material nature will have on our consciousness and on our activities. He explains what is Brahman realization, what is Brahman realization, the glories of Bhagavad-Gita. The few verses, set of verses are how one who preaches Bhagavad-Gita, the message of Bhagavad-Gita becomes so dear to Krishna. And ultimately, he gives the conclusion, which is in 1866, a very famous verse, Sarva Dharman Parityaja, Mamekam Sharanam Vija, Aham Tom Sarva Papebhyo Mokshashnami Mahasucha. He says, just surrender unto me, and I will take care of all your sinful reactions. Krishna's final instruction is just surrender unto me. I will take care of all the sinful reactions and will free you, which will free you from all the bondages of repeated birth and death. And ultimately, you'll become enlightened and you will achieve the eternal abode of the spiritual abode. You go back home. The main point is surrender unto me. Specifically, as I was saying, 56 through 60, Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to work in pure devotional service. Many times this is this verse echoes, or the same theme is given before also. Krishna has brought our attention in the 13th chapter also, with the famous verse, Purusha Prakriti Stohi Bhungte Prakriti Jan Gunan Karanam Guna Sangasya Sad Asad Yoni Janmashu, right? What is the meaning? Krishna said in this 13:22 that every living entity in this material world follows a way of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. Under the influence of the three modes of material nature, one acts. And due to the association with that material nature, one, of course, develops the desires, and then action follows. And those actions will bind one, whether the action is bad or good. He meets with good and evil among various species. Depending on the action, one will get the birth accordingly among various species of life, which is 8.4 million species, right? So that is how Krishna is explaining in 13th chapter the modes work or influence us, and how thereby we take different births in different bodies also. Now, one who has our intelligence, for us, in general, we work according to our intelligence, right? People in general work according to the intelligence. For their self-interest, what would benefit me the most? That is the general criteria of people, the thinking of people in general. I want to work, but what work would lead me to the best result for me or for my family, extended family? However, mostly people are left to select their own path of what and decide what is right, what is wrong. And that is very hard. It's not easy. We cannot decide on our own. Even in general life, we need guidance. We have mentors. Even at work, we have mentors, right? They guide us. What's your next, how your next few years should be looking like, where you can grow in your job. Or we have at school, we have teachers to help us. Any field, athlete, they have mentors to train them and all that. So why not for spiritual life? More so for spiritual life, we need guidance, right? To come out of this ignorance, there is no way we can come out of this ignorance that we have been going through. Ignorance is basically so many things, but the root cause of the result of our ignorance is, which we see prominent, is identification with the body. So we need help from the higher source. Otherwise, there is no way. We need help from the scriptures. Therefore, Krishna has given us this Bhagavad-Gita, has given us Srimad Bhagavatam, and also has given us the association of devotees who represent the teachings of Bhagavad-Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam in their life. The devotees who are living examples of the Shastra, we can say. And they know the art of living in this world without being affected by it, right? We are trying to constantly find happiness, but it's not going to be possible in this material world. And Krishna, again, using Krishna's words only, in Bhagavad Gita 5:22, Krishna very clearly, and many other places in Bhagavad Gita, mentions 5:22 is, I like that verse. It's Krishna says, Yehi samsparsha jo bhoga dukha yonaya evate adi antavantak kaunteya na teshu ramate buddha. Intelligent or a wise person will not take part in the sources of misery, and where do the miseries, how do they arise? They arise by contact with the material senses. Because why are there causes of misery? Because there is a beginning and an end, and the wise man does not delight in them. That's the translation of the verse 5:22. And Prabhupada explains also in that purport of 5:22 that material sense pleasures, material sense pleasures are due to contact with material senses, right? I see with my material eyes an iPhone. This is just a simple, very simplified example. I see with my material eyes, I see an iPhone, and I really like the features of the iPhone. It's quite big. It's nice camera and many things. So I'm attracted to it, right? So the iPhone is the sense object. The material eyes is material senses. So material senses coming in contact with the iPhone, the sense object. I feel like I will, and in my mind, I think it will give me pleasure. I need to have it. And similarly, we can expand it to so many other things, from job to house to people I like, or many things. But there is a flaw in that, right? Krishna has given us why those kind of pleasures, so-called pleasures, will not give us happiness, although we think they give us happiness. Anybody? I just want to.
Hare Krishna Mataji?
Yes, Babu. Hare Krishna.
You're asking question, Mataji, right? To know why it not give happiness?
Yeah.
Because it is never ending, right? It is. It won't stop there, and then after some time, then again you want something bigger, right?
Good point.
So
yeah.
Hare Krishna Mataji, it's my thinking is that it's a mirage. It's like trying to find the horizon, and you keep going closer, and it keeps getting farther. And material desires are like our material desires act like flame. The more ghee you put in it with new desires, the more it flames.
Yes, it's never ending. And Prabhu also said it's. Yes.
I think it's another point is it's a temporary.
It's temporary.
Very won't last much long. So you'll be back to the Sukha Dukkha stage.
Yes, very important point. All 3 points are very important. Anybody else would like to say? Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji. And thank you, Ram Prabhu too.
Another one is, Mataji, it depends on the desire. If the desire is just meant
for your senses, then it will give no satisfaction. But if the desire is to cook for the Lord, to dress the Lord, and do just savor for the devotees, then that will actually give you true satisfaction. So those desires are the good desires. So even among them, we can be discriminating. Okay. So excellent points. Thank you, Mataji. Yeah, we covered the points because, as was mentioned, things of this material world are temporary. Nothing is going to stay over the same over the years. It's going to age. Influence of time is there, right? And body itself is temporary. Say somebody is satisfied with enjoying, say I get an iPhone, whatever the latest is, iPhone 12 or whatever latest, and I'm happy for my next 40 years of my life with this phone. It has all the features it needs and I'm happy. But then it's going to end, right? My happiness is short. As long as I'm alive, it's there. But it's going to end. And of course, the phone will not, they don't make phones that way, that it's going to last 40 years. But body is going, itself is temporary. So that happiness dies with the body. Again, in my next life, I'm again looking for the same happiness in a different, if not iPhone, it's a house, or it may be a car, or it may be a job. It's same thing. It's not taking me anywhere, right? And as was shared also, it's an incompatible proposition that we are asking here. We as a spirit soul are spiritual in nature, and we are trying to find pleasure or happiness with inert matter. Matter can never be the source of our happiness. It cannot give us happiness. Of course, it's a different thing, as Lalita Kund Mataji explained. If we engage matter for something else, which is Krishna, the higher, the source of everything, Krishna. That's the ideal situation. That is what is needed. So it's not going to. In general, people try to follow this temporary ways of life for finding happiness, but it is a misery. Actually, Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam purport, right? The gap between two miseries, that small time period, is what is called happiness. When there is no misery happening in our life and everything is going smooth, that small time period is what we call as happiness. Krishna himself never says in Bhagavad-Gita that, this material world is a happy place to be in. He never says that. In fact, he says the opposite. He says this world is defined as dukkha alayam, place of full of miseries, and it is anityam. It is temporary. So a wise person is not interested in these temporary things. We are interested in something permanent. If we are told there's something permanent which will give you happiness, we said, okay, I want to go for that. But nonetheless, we have to work in this material world, and we have to deal with matter in this world. Go to work, interact with people, colleagues, so many things. In general, we have to earn to keep our body and soul together. So that is the art of working. And we cannot be too much attached to enjoyment. As we saw, it's temporary. It will never satisfy the soul. And we cannot be on the extreme where we say, I will renounce completely. It's an extreme. It's not going to be possible for the soul to not have desires. Soul is always full of desires. We cannot be desireless. So what is the solution? By nature, the soul is seeking happiness, but we are getting frustrated either ways, because dry renunciation without a higher engagement also is not going to be sustainable. Will not sustain it. Maybe for some time, people do leave their jobs and things and just kind of say, I'm renounced, I don't want anything. But it's without a positive engagement, a higher positive engagement, it's not going to work, because the soul is always active and seeking pleasure. So what to do? Bhagavatam gives the answer also, right? A famous verse, many verses. I'm just quoting one verse here. Savai pumsha paro dharmo yatho bhakti ratokshage yahitukiya pratihata Yat yayatma suprasiddhati. It says parodharma, the supreme occupation or dharma for all living entities or all humanities. Of course, animals, they act out of instinct and they don't have the intelligence, but for all humanity is that man can attain this loving devotional service, is by which man can attain this loving devotional service to Krishna, to the Supreme Lord. And such devotional service, when it's rendered qualifying, unmotivated and uninterrupted, ahetuki apratihata, means there is no motive, no self-motive inside in rendering service to the Lord. And it is uninterrupted. Nothing can stop me. No, there is no circumstances in my life where, okay, if this circumstances is not favorable for me, I mean, as per my liking, I will not do the service. It is uninterrupted. Unmotivated, uninterrupted service to the Supreme Lord is what will satisfy the soul, nothing else. We make futile attempts to get rid of the miseries, but it's not going to work. Therefore, Bhagavatam is giving this very nice explanation of the verse. And it's our natural position to be engaged in devotional service. That's the only way the soul is happy. Now, there is a famous story of, not famous, but I would say there is a story of, I think it's Janak Maharaj, who was asked, because he was a king, right? And he had a big responsibility, and his kingdom was flourishing and everything was nice. He was doing his job as a king very nicely, huge responsibility. But at the same time, he's a Mahajan. Janak Maharaj is a great devotee of the Lord. How do you balance? And we have the same problem, right? We have our duties. Of course, we don't have a big kingdom like Janak Maharaj to manage. Still, we get overwhelmed many times with so many things to do in life, our duties and all. At the same time, we have to do our, be Krishna conscious. So there was a set of sages, who wanted to hear from Janak Maharaj that how are you able to maintain your kingdom and at the same time you are be so God conscious or Krishna conscious that you are doing everything perfectly. So Janak Maharaj said, okay, I will let you know. So they went to his kingdom, but please have prasadam first, and tomorrow morning I will talk about it. So he personally served, he made them sit and he was serving prasadam. But as they were serving prasadam, there was a sword hanging on each of the sages who were sitting. And it was not very tightly hooked or something. It looked like the sword can fall anytime on the head. So the Janak Maharaj was serving prasadam and he was very nicely serving and saying, please have prasadam. The sages were eating, but their mind was constantly on the sword. When would it fall? It can fall anytime. Let me eat, but at the same time, constantly remembering. So they were perplexed. How is Janak Maharaj doing this? What is he doing to us like this? Why is he serving and at the same time having a sword hang on our head? They didn't understand, but they thought, okay, we'll talk about it tomorrow. So they ate their prasadam, and the next morning they were very eager to approach Janak Maharaj, and they did, and asked him, can you now please reveal, how are you doing both so nicely? Janak Maharaj said, how was the prasadam yesterday? So they said, yeah, prasadam was very well prepared, very nice. But at the same time, you had the swords hanging on our head. Our constant remembrance was on the sword. We were eating, but at the same time, we were thinking of the sword falling on our head anytime. So Janak Maharaj said, that is the whole answer that you were seeking from me. I'm doing my worldly duties as a king, taking care of my kingdom, but constantly at the back of my mind is Krishna. How would it please Krishna? What am I doing? Is it pleasing to Krishna? Krishna is always on the back of my mind. So that is the art of working, that we work, but we constantly remember Krishna always while we are working. This is, I'm doing it for you, Krishna, as a duty. You have given me this duty or this responsibility. I have dependent kids. I have my husband. I have my work. This is coming from you. You have given me this. So I want to do the best in whatever I do, because I'm doing as a service to you. This is a service. I'm seeing it as a service, not rather just work or material thing, material duty or something. So that is how we spiritualize, by putting Krishna in the center. So this example was given just to highlight that point, how art of working for while in this material world, how to work and not be affected by the work. So coming back to this verse, Krishna in text 56, in verse 56, I'll just go through those 5 verses so we have an idea, because text 60 or verse 60 is a culmination of what has been said in the last 4 verses. It's a link together. So in verse 56, Krishna is saying, I personally will protect my devotees from all reactions and lead him directly to my supreme abode. So he's giving his assurance that though engaged in all kinds of activities, my pure devotee will always be under my protection. And he reaches the eternal abode by my grace. Point to be noted is, engaged in all kinds of activities, of course, which are sanctioned. We're not talking about vikarmas here. Vikarma means activities against the scriptures. Krishna is not saying if you kill a cow, go open a slaughterhouse and you still have my protection. Of course, that's to be understood. He's saying that in general, all kinds of activities that we have to do, but if one is constantly thinking and working under Krishna's direction, how do we do it? Of course, we'll come to it later. How do we always think of Krishna? It's a practice. It's a cultivation. It's not going to come overnight, but it's a practice. We have to start somewhere. But Krishna's assurance is there that if you always think of me and do your activities, you have my protection and ultimately you will come to my abode. In 57, Krishna is saying, in all activities, just depend on me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be conscious of me. So he's saying, include me in your activities. What is the consciousness we should be having while we are working? In 58, Krishna says, he talks about the results of working with such consciousness. What will happen if one works with that consciousness? One will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. But if one does not work in that consciousness, what happens? Krishna is saying, one will act through false ego. And because one will not take my guidance, not hearing me, you will be lost in this material whirlpool. In 59, Krishna is saying, your duty, he's addressing Arjuna here, he's directly saying, your duty is to fight. Even if you try to abandon, the modes will force you to do it. Arjuna, if you remember, wanted to quit in chapter 1, giving up fighting after seeing all his kingsmen, all the gurus, family members, all those things, right? He was overwhelmed. He said, I cannot kill them. I would rather give up fighting and go to the forest and sit. So Krishna is telling Arjuna here that you will fight regardless, because that's your mode. The modes that's your swabhava. We'll come to that also later. That's your nature. So it will force you to act. Arjuna's dharma as a Kshatriya was to fight, right? So he was going against his nature here. And now in text 60, we are saying Krishna is mentioning the result of the Lord, of following the Lord's orders and what happens when one does not. So this is the verse. It's linked with all this 4-5 verses together. He's encouraging basically Arjuna to fight the battle with the spirit of service to him. And he says also that Arjuna, you give up this sense of false ego, having your own idea of when I should act, when I should not act, having my own concocted idea of this is right, this is wrong, based on my own thinking with my mind. It will not help you. You will act regardless. It will not bring auspiciousness to you. You will not be glorious at the end, right? He says that if you leave the battlefield, what happened? He says, one who has been honored, dishonor, people will talk bad about you because he left the battlefield. Dishonor is worse than death. So now Krishna, because he's mentioning this false ego, right? Krishna says, give up the sense of false ego, which gives you, which is having your own idea and you want to act because you want to act on your false ego and not want to kill your family members. Give up that false ego. So what is false ego? If we can stop here for a moment and say, if anybody would like to try answering that.
Like I am the doer, Mataji?
False ego is I am the doer. Yes, Mataji.
I'm this body.
False ego is I am this body. Yes.
We forget our spiritual identity, that we are the spirit souls and this body is temporary, and try to accumulate everything for satisfaction of a body.
Exactly, Mataji. Thank you. All perfect answers. So yeah, false ego, our material body and mind are like a temporary clothing for the soul, for the eternal soul, right? And actually they cannot mix together unless we spiritualize our mind. Of course, when we go back, we don't have a separate subtle body. We have just a spiritual body. So the material body and the material mind, it's like mixing oil and water together. They will not mix. So what nature controls is the material body and the subtle mind. Nature cannot control the eternal spirit soul, which is part of Krishna's spiritual energy, right? It's spiritual in nature. But because we are bewildered under the influence of the modes, we, the eternal selves, spirit souls, we identify under the influence of the modes with the material mind and body, thinking that we are this body and mind and act accordingly. And that is our false ego. Another way it is said, false ego is a subtle feature of the inferior material energy. It's the first thing that is we get a covering of for the soul when we come to the material world. It's a very point of contact between the spirit and matter. It's what keeps us tied to this material world with repeated births and deaths. And under the influence of false ego, we, as Mataji was saying, I am the doer. We take credit for many things, right? Everything we do independently, we think we can do it, and I am the doer. But material nature controls everyone. Of course, material nature is working under the guidance of Krishna himself. And we cannot see how it's so, we are so covered up with this false ego, because it's not just this lifetime. We should understand it is so many lifetimes and lifetimes of this covering, which has, we have gone through, that it is like it's there, it's part of us. It's it's the last thing to go in our whole thing, in our progress to spiritual realization. It certainly, it is always there. Although we theoretically, of course, know we are not this body, but how much do we act on that? It is very hard, very, very hard. We slam our finger and we we cry and think. Of course, we get the pain. No, that's not to minimize that, but we identify in our daily language also. We say there is that person going in the car. We identify the car with the person only, and we say it like that. So because that is what we think, the person is this body also. It's very, very subtle, and very, very hard to let go of, or to purify us of that false ego. But it of course can be done through the potent process of bhakti yoga. So it makes us think we are in control of our nature. We really, and that bounds us more and more with this material energy. So false ego is also a detailed description is given in Bhagavatam, 11th canto, about how false ego is also influenced by the three modes, meaning false ego can be in mode of goodness, false ego can be in mode of passion and ignorance. False ego in mode of goodness, the living entity identifies with the mind, itself with the mind. I am this mind. And what is the mind? Mind is the living entity's subtle medium through which we reflect. It's like a mirror, medium of reflection. It's comparable to a mirror. And it's through the agency of the mind we identify with the body. It creates a scenario, how we start to think about something. Oh, my future will be like this. I will have a nice job. I will have a nice house, a nice wife or a husband, nice kids. And then we go into that mode of thinking, speculating, of course, through the mind. So it creates a scenario with which we strongly think this is who I am. Like, I am a woman, I am a man, and I dedicate myself to be an Indian, African, American. People give their lives for their country, right? I'm dedicated to give my life for my country because I am an American. That's actually we are acting. It's a false ego. It's a concoction. Uh, Actually, who we are today, I am American. Tomorrow, I can be just opposite. I may be Indian. I may be African. Maybe something else. But it gives a strong bonding to with our body as our identity, our real identity, which is not true as a man or a woman or American Indian. So Krishna therefore says in chapter 6 also, Bhagavad-Gita, right? Mind is the cause of the bondage and the mind is cause of liberation. It's how we train our mind. It can be our worst, it can be our best friend, and it can be our worst enemy. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and the mind detached from the sense objects is the cause of liberation. But how do we get there, right? It's a constant. Mind is a repository of all the desires. Any desire that we have, or anything we see a movie, we see a picture, we hear something, all the impressions are stored in the mind. So sometimes we have a desire that pops out all of a sudden. It's a very weird desire. Where is it coming from? It's coming from our, maybe not this lifetime, maybe from previous lifetime, because the mind, the subtle senses go along with the soul to the next destination, the next body. And of course, it can pop up because it's storing everything. So we have to be very careful of what we are watching. We are watching a movie, all the things that we are watching, there is an impression in the mind. That's mind in the mode of, false ego in the mode of goodness. False ego in the mode of passion, the soul is identifying with the physical senses. And false ego in the mode of ignorance, the soul is identifying with the objects perceived by the physical senses. That is what I'm hearing. Physical senses are the ears, eyes, nose, tongue, skin, through which we can knowledge acquiring senses, right? Those 5 knowledge acquiring senses. What we hear, what we see, what is taste, smell, all that. And the real ego, as mentioned before, devotees mentioned, the real ego is that I am the servant of Krishna, being his part and parcel. I'm not this material body and the mind. So here Krishna is saying that if you don't act, if Arjuna does not act according to Krishna's direction, then Krishna mentions as in previous verse than this, that he'll be falsely directed by his mind. Directed by whom? By his mind, by his feeling, by the illusory energy. So we can never be inactive. That's the nature of the soul. And we are always forced to act by the modes. So then the question is, I already gave the example and how to act with that consciousness and what should be our consciousness when we act for our ultimate benefit. Krishna therefore gives, idea is to link our activities, our consciousness with Krishna. That is the yoga. That's the process given. That's what entire Bhagavad-Gita is about, Bhakti Yoga. Basically, of course, Krishna introduces Astanga Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, but finally he says, you practice Bhakti Yoga because he says, surrender on to me. Krishna's point is, we practice Bhakti Yoga. So Krishna here is telling Arjuna, look, you are going to be impelled to act either by higher force, which is my instructions, which they will act regardless, or you'll succumb to the modes of material nature. The choice is yours, who you want to associate with or who you want to select, Krishna or the material energy. And therefore we are marginal energy of the Lord, right? We are Tatashta Shakti. There is a inferior material energy of the Lord, and there is a superior energy of the Lord, Krishna's energy, which is Devi Shakti, Devi Prakriti, and we are in the middle. All we have independence of is to choose who we want to associate with. We cannot act independently totally that I can be free from everything. We are very limited, tiny free will we have or choice we have at every moment of our life, right? We have to make the choice every moment, material energy or spiritual energy. And that choice is given to Arjuna also by Krishna. At the end of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I have spoken to you everything. Now it's up to you who you want to select. But remember this much, that regardless what you select, meaning if you don't select Krishna's direction or the spiritual energy, you will be associating with the material energy and it will make you act. You will be compelled to act even though you don't want to act. That's another verse in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is telling Arjuna, or Arjuna is asking Krishna, it looks like I don't want to act, but I'm compelled to act. And that brings us to the point of our swabhava. Our psychophysical nature is there. Our swabhava is there. What is swabhava? We have two natures, right? Spiritual nature, our actual spiritual original nature, which is spiritual in nature, and then we have our second nature, which is acquired kind of a nature from previous lifetimes mainly, where we have us being associated with particular modes and we have developed some tendencies, some habits which are deeply, deeply ingrained in us and which we are carrying forward from previous lifetimes. Just like nobody tells us here, when we say, I like red color, I like brown color, but I don't like green color. Nobody forced on us that you should not like green color, you should only like red color, and you should only like brown color. Where is that coming from? Where is that tendency of liking and disliking coming from? Right? Our parents don't teach us that we should only like red color, you should only like, that's not, that we don't never hear of that. But we have our own choices, our preferences, our own taste, something we like. For example, something that we have been eating from our childhood, we'll obviously like when we are 20 years old because we have developed that taste over the period of time because of our constant eating that over the period of 20 years. So when I'm 20 years old, because from 1 through 20 years of age, I have developed a taste because I have eaten that. Similarly, because we have associated with the modes, and some modes, of course, there are 3 modes, and there are a combination of modes. Some modes are more prominent, and we get influenced by those modes. Because of that association with the modes over the lifetimes, in this lifetime we can say that this is my conditioning, that I have this kind of likes and this kind of dislikes. um, each one each one of us has that, and that is our secondary swabhava. Our original swabhava is that I'm a spirit soul, that's my original nature. But this is my another swabhava, which is influenced by the modes. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, you are a warrior, you are a kshatriya. Now kshatriya is not just, kshatriya's nature is not, we can manufacture now. Say now I go for a training in military, for extensive training for 3 months or 6 months, and then I pass the extensive training to become a soldier, and so I'm called a kshatriya. That's not what we say as a kshatriya, because kshatriya is a warrior or administrative class, but that's not what kshatriya means. Kshatriya is a nature where it's an instinct, it's a tendency one is born with. um, uh, so kshatriya's nature is to give protection to others, to give shelter to others. Government is also one form of passive kshatriya nature, because they're supposed to protect the citizens. The aim is the same, protection, whether they do it passively or aggressively, as a like a king is a kshatriya. So Krishna is telling this, that you will act according to your nature. You do not have a choice as what you will do. Your choice is very limited, whether you follow my direction or you follow your own swabhava, or your own thinking, your own mind. But because of your swabhava, you will regardlessly act. The question is not of not fighting and packing and going home. You will come back. As soon as you see somebody being tortured, you will jump in, because that's your nature as a kshatriya. So even in Krishna consciousness, we have our own nature, right? Which we cannot give up our nature like that. It is there. It is. So for devotees, the question is, now I'm a practicing devotee. How does the modes of material nature affect me? Maybe I'm initiated, or I'm about to initiate, or I'm following the process nicely. Regulative principles, 16 rounds, and I'm following either the orders given to be by my shiksha diksha gurus. How can we say that we will not be influenced? But I still have my propensities, right? We see some devotees liking some service, some they don't like some other service. Some devotees love washing pots, right? They love it, but they don't like going on the altar and doing deity service. So even in devotional service, we have some tendencies, right? Likings and dislikings. And of course, the spiritual master understands the disciples' weaknesses, strengths, the swabhava, and gradually works with the disciple, gives the service accordingly to for the disciple to make progress. So that is one day we will come to the point where we can do any service, whether it's cleaning the toilet, or whether it's going on the altar, or whether it's washing the dishes or preaching out. We are not there yet, because we still have our conditioning. We are maybe introvert, we may be extrovert, we may be shy, we may be outspoken. We all have our different swabhavas. But for the service of the Lord, that's a Vaishnava, right? A pure can do anything as is required for Krishna's service, or the devotees or the spiritual master's service. That is the pure that will come. We just have to follow the process, and we have guidance from the spiritual master. He's training us slowly and gradually how to do it. And we should not, therefore, minimize if somebody likes just fixing cars, a devotee likes fixing cars, or in general, somebody likes fixing cars. We should not minimize their service as, oh, it's just that's a low service or this service. It's according to the swabhava. We can get liberated from our, so when we are doing devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual masters, shiksha diksha gurus, bona fide spiritual masters, if we put aside our false ego, then we will not be affected by the modes, and the service that we are doing will be liberated, will be a liberating thing, will make us liberated. So how we approach the service depends on us. Is it with false ego? I am the doer, I am doing it, I am so talented. Or is it to please Krishna and the devotees? That is the fine line that defines, basically it's our consciousness, right? Defines us. Nonetheless, of course, because we are doing it for the pleasure of devotees or Krishna, it may be also mixed with some part of our false ego. It's not that we'll not get some result of purification, we will, but it is not as liberating as when done without the tinge of false ego. That is, we have to cultivate. It's not, of course, again, because of our so much conditioning, we cannot expect fully pure consciousness and becoming pure devotees overnight, but it has to be cultivated. We have to start somewhere. We start with that. Try to think, what am I doing? Why am I doing? For whom? Whose pleasure I'm doing? What is my consciousness at this point in time when I'm doing this service? Thinking that I am the only one who can do it. I'm the only one qualified. I can do it. Nobody else can do it. I'm so, we have to take out that I and me and mine factor and put Krishna and the devotees of gurus in the center, doing for their pleasure. That makes a big difference, and that is what we can progress with. So this is just small explanation or just on this verse. It's a very nice understanding Krishna is giving us through this verse, that how we are going to be compelled to work. But if we take the guidance of Krishna, then for the spiritual masters and the scriptures, it's a totally different story altogether. We should follow that. So now we will, any question, well, we'll take the questions later, right? We'll talk about Jayananda Prabhu. Jayananda Prabhu, as we see in the picture here, his disappearance day was on, this year it was on May 24th, which was last Monday. And it was one of the empowered early disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada, like I said, instructed that, we should observe his disappearance day just like any other acharyas. And also because he played such a important role in establishing Rathyatra, getting the Rathyatra started. Prabhupada also said we should put a picture of Jayananda Prabhu in the front, the cart of Rathyatra. So Jayananda Prabhu was born in America, in US. He was born as Jim Core, and he was born to a upper middle class, more than a middle class family. So he actually earned he had a degree in mechanical engineering from Ohio State University. But even with such a valuable degree, good education background, he ended up being a cab driver in San Francisco. And he was asked, why are you just driving a cab? You have such a good qualification. And he says, I don't fit in the upper class crowd. That was his disposition. He didn't like that. And he was very introspective in nature. And before joining Krishna consciousness, he said, I have never felt happy in my life. I've always felt empty, unsatisfied. Even during my college years, he used to say that he never felt happy. But after joining Krishna consciousness, which was in 1967, um, he actually he read a small article in San Francisco paper, and he heard about an Indian Swami coming to the Bay Area um, to give the message of God, the chanting and all that. And he was interested, and he attended Prabhupada's class lectures. And he attended most of the lectures. And at that time, Prabhupada came in 1966, he established, right? So it was just 1 year Prabhupada had come to US. And early days, it was mostly hippies attending Prabhupada's lectures. And it is said Jayananda Prabhu was the only straight person, meaning like in the crowd, he was the only one well dressed and civilized kind of thing. Because hippies wanted to experience something different, right? So they were having long hairs and not proper clothing and things like that. He was very fond of attending the morning lectures, especially. He would get up in the morning, and he liked it because there would be no other hippies around in the class. They would not come to the class that early. And sometimes he would be the only person listening to Prabhupada's Bhagavatam class. He got attached listening to Prabhupada's class. He got attached to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada also lovingly reciprocated with him by personally cooking for Jayananda Prabhu and serving him. And then soon he accepted initiation from Srila Prabhupada, and he was named Jayananda Thakur. He was very generous. As soon as he found out the need Prabhupada had for printing books and distributing books, he gave his life savings, which he had earned, which was at that time $5,000. He gave it for printing of Bhagavad-Gita to Srila Prabhupada. And he continued to work as a cab driver, but he would give all his earnings to Srila Prabhupada to support the temple and the printing of the books and whatever is needed. He would rise very early in the morning, chant all his rounds, read, cook, never deviated from that. And he loved it. He loved doing that. He was so happy practicing Krishna consciousness. And he loved prasadam. He actually, it is said, he worshipped prasadam. Even a small crumbs would fall on the ground, he would pick them up, and he will eat it. And he loved to cook. At the same time, he would love to cook and also distribute prasadam in a very, very big way. He would love distributing prasadam to everybody. He loved chanting the holy names, the Mahamantra. He always used to chant very enthusiastically in the kirtans and dance. And even after working for long, long hours, when devotees would be so tired and would be ready to go take some rest, Jayananda Prabhu would be so enthusiastic that he would go into the temple room for kirtan. His japa also was very, very intense and focused. He strived to personally associate with each mantra that he was chanting of the Mahamantra. And he got the instructions from Srila Prabhupada, right, about following the 4 regulative principles, chanting and serving the devotees, helping the temple, supporting the temple. He executed that. He took it as his life and soul, the instructions received from Prabhupada. Another very nice quality of Jayananda Prabhu was his humility. He treated everyone, whether his superiors or new devotees or same age, he treated everyone with very humble nature. And he never wanted any glory for himself. No matter, he was working so hard, much, much harder than any other devotees staying in the temple that time. He would never want any praise. He avoided praise. His devotees used to say that if you want to associate with Jayananda Prabhu, don't praise him. He does not like that at all. And his humility was also very natural, because it's not that today he showed humility to somebody and tomorrow he's not showing humility, or different circumstances, no humility. It is constant. It was there. Once a new boy joined the temple, and he wanted to do some service. So the devotees asked him, okay, go and join the person who is taking the trash out, help him. And Jayananda Prabhu was that person who was taking the trash out every week. That was his job. So this boy came and helped, and Jayananda Prabhu was very happy to receive his help. And he noticed one thing. He said later on, he was recollecting, he was thinking that if the garbage man is in this temple is so blissful and so happy, I cannot imagine the rest of the devotees, what would they be like? So Jayananda Prabhu, although so senior, because he joined so early, he never displayed, that he's a senior or this or that. And he was doing all kinds of services that were required. That was his expertise also, that he would do. He was expert at everything: cooking, preaching, deity worship, public relationships, Sankirtan organizing. He was at that time devotees were selling incense to get some income for the temple, construction, anything that required spreading Krishna consciousness. He would tirelessly get up in the morning. He was the first person to get up in the morning and the last person to go to bed. Washing dishes, getting flowers, cleaning the kitchen, taking the trash out, anything, whatever was given to him, he made sure it is done. Whatever service was given to him, he would make sure it was done, no matter how busy he is or how personal hardships he had to go through to complete that service. He seemed inexhaustible. He would never stop. He would never waste a minute to take a nap or something. He was on that level. Krishna, Krishna also says, right, one who claims to be my devotee is not my devotee, but who is devotee of my devotee is my devotee. So Jayananda Prabhu completely manifested this quality. He was always striving to be Das Anudas, the servant of the servant. And like I mentioned, there was no artificial humility in him. And people on the streets used to, because like people during that time were drunken people were there on the streets, and they loved him. So when devotees used to go, the drunken people would ask, where is Jayananda, my old friend? And one time, this is after his departure, after he left the body, the San Francisco, they were trying to get permit every year. They have to get permit to organize the Rathyatra. So they approached the city. There was a woman, public official, and she was stubborn, woman, known to be very stubborn. And so when devotees approached her, she asked, where is Jayananda? And then the devotee said he left his body, he passed away. And she broke down in tears and began to cry. That was the purity of heart of Jayananda Prabhu, that he touched everybody's heart, including that lady who was so stubborn and all. And he was expert in engaging everybody in Krishna's service. That Krishna devotees, he was more compassionate to everybody, including non-devotees. He would see how can this soul be engaged in Krishna's service. And he would make that person, a new bhakta maybe who's joined, he'll make them feel that the service that he is doing is the most important service. And very, he was very compassionate. And he was very simple in nature, very direct. And he would speak from his heart to the other person's heart. He would engage even the hippies, people we think we cannot approach because they are uncooperative, they're non-devotees off the street. But he was expert in engaging everyone, even the non-devotees and the drunkards and everybody in Krishna's service. And furthermore, he is the backbone. He is known as the king of Rathyatra because he was working behind the scene to do everything, prepare everything for the Rathyatra festival. He would make the cart, work on making the cart, assembling it, organizing the entire Rathyatra festival, which is buying the flowers, the funds required, anything required to build the cart, the materials. He would arrange for the permits from the city, organize the cooking and serving of the prasadam at that time. So everything he was coordinating very harmoniously with all the devotees. Even in his last, so he contracted, he had leukemia, and he passed away in May of 1977, just a few months before Prabhupada left in November 1977, and Jayananda Prabhu passed away in 1977 of May, and May 1977. And he, even when he was in the hospital, he was, as much as he could, he was trying to staying busy organizing the Rathyatra from festival from the hospital bed. He would call on the phone and ask what's happening and guide the devotees. And he had the propensity to consume buckets and buckets of halwa, uh, um, you know, samosas, potatoes, without any side effect. He had that capacity. Um, and of course, he had a very special relationship with Srila Prabhupada. He had complete faith in Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada used to call on him um, that where is Jayananda whenever he used to come, and devotees would go out looking for Jayananda Prabhu, and Jayananda Prabhu would say, I'm too fallen, I'm too dirty, I cannot go see Srila Prabhupada. But Srila Prabhupada, of course, understood, and there was a special transcendental exchange between the spiritual master and the disciple. So Prabhupada, as Prabhupada has said, Prabhupada loved Jayananda Prabhu with all his heart. So when he heard, because Prabhupada was present on this planet when Jayananda Prabhu left, and when Prabhupada heard that Jayananda Prabhu passed away, Prabhupada said he went back to Godhead, and Prabhupada even had tears in his eyes because of such a selfless devotion he had. He served Srila Prabhupada with selfless devotion. And therefore, Jayananda Prabhu is also known as the first ISKCON saint. So we can only pray to Jayananda Prabhu. We can, Srila Prabhupada showed him so much affection, so we can pray to Krishna that we get a tinge of his qualities and follow in his footsteps. He was such an exemplary devotee for us to follow, showing by his example. So with that, we'll stop the class. Sorry, I went over time, 10 minutes.
JayaSubhadra, you will take questions?
Yeah, we can, if we have time.
We have a couple of questions, maybe. Krishna devotees, if you have any questions, please unmute and ask.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you for the wonderful class, Mataji. One question I have is, Mataji, so in practical terms, so it says like, compelled by the work born of your own nature, you will act the same. So we'll be always acting. So in practical terms, so it may be interpreted that, okay, I'll be anyway acting the way I wanted to act. So I continue to do whatever I'm doing, right? So I'm trying to relate that in our practical life. How do I take this verse, Mataji?
Yeah, we will be compelled to act, but we'll be compelled to act according to our swabhava, right? Our psychophysical nature, what we have, our tendencies that we have acquired from previous lifetimes. And they may be in the mode of ignorance also, or mode of passion. So our goal is to come to the mode of goodness, to practice spiritual life. Otherwise, it's very hard. Only mode of goodness is conducive to practice spiritual life. So how to come out of that mode of ignorance and passion? We may not even realize we are there in mode of passion and ignorance, right? In general, we just act due to our tendencies. But somebody, that's where we have Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. We need that intervention in our life to tell us, no, what you are doing is wrong. This is not how you should be doing. And this is how you should be doing. And that is where Krishna is telling the choice is yours, Arjuna. You make the decision whether you want to follow my instructions or you want to follow your own swabhava, which is guided by your mind, and it will lead you to degradation if you keep following it, which is degradation is the repeated birth and death. So you make the choice. That is that independence we have. We don't have any other choice, because like Krishna says, we will be acting out of our nature. Is that?
Yes, Mother. Thank you, Mother. Yeah. Right.
So Satyasara, should we continue with the program? I don't know if there are any questions.
Yeah. Sorry, somebody came.
Oh.
Any other questions?
And we see from the life of Jayananda Prabhu, right? This verse, Krishna says that the last sentence of the purport, Krishna is saying, but anyone who voluntarily engages himself under the direction of the Supreme Lord becomes glorious. We can see the glorious life of Jayananda Prabhu, how he engaged himself in the service of his spiritual master, following, Shiksha, Diksha Gurus, who, the scriptures, and he made his life perfect by going back to Godhead. So that's the goal of life, anyways.
Can I add one more?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Jayananda Prabhu is a brilliant example. And also we have examples from Shastras also. Valmiki Maharishi. He was Ratnakar, right? So he was a robber. How he changed by the mercy of Narada. So like that. So the nature changes. The Subhava changes. Kubja is another example. Dhruva Maharaj. There are so many. Arjuna, Chitraketu Maharaj, Ajamil. So there are many examples. We can see how the nature changes by practicing bhakti. But that's why you need to work under gurus, both Siksha and Diksha gurus, to make that transformation happen. Otherwise, we'll be in the same modes only, life after life. Yes, Prabhu.
I was just happened to read remembrance of Jayapada Swami Maharaj about Jayananda Prabhu. Can I read few lines? Is that we got time for that?
Quickly, Prabhu.
Okay. So this is wonderful. I thought I'll read. So this written by Jayapada Swami Maharaj. When I came to Krishna Consciousness Movement in San Francisco in 1968, it was the second Rathyatra in ISKCON. The first Rathyatra was on a truck. This was the first custom-made Rathyatra. In San Francisco, there were cable cars. So they have a low-laying wires throughout the city. And Jayananda Prabhu was an engineer. So he designed the telescopic Ratha that it could lower its height and go under the cables and rise up again after passing the cables. So he engaged me to help to build the Ratha. I remember that he asked me, do I know how to hold a nail? I told him yes. He said, show me. And I held the nail and he hammered it. Before the nail got into the wood, I removed my hand so that he wouldn't smash my hand. He said, very good. Do you know how to hammer as well? I said, yes. He said, show me. And he then made me hammer the nails. Then after I passed the test, he showed me the pictures of the Rathyatra in Puri with millions of people and huge Rathas. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare.
That was amazing, Prabhu. Thank you for reading that. Okay, so with that, we'll Ram Prabhu is going to give a quick thank you note, and we'll move on to the next one. Ram Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can you hear us?
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji, for giving a wonderful class on 18.60. So start with giving the summary of the 18th chapter, is the summary of Gita and renunciation of mode of material nature, consciousness, and then realizing of the Brahman realization, and then glories of Gita, and then finally the 66th verse, Sarvadharma Parityaya, how to renunciate. So he also explained that how this mode works, and then how this influence in the chapter 13.22 verse, and also that people have tendency to work for self-interest, and most people select what is right and what is wrong, but we need a guidance and we need a mentors like work in every place. So and also that's why we have all the gurus, and also explain that that Krishna has given Srimad Bhagavad-Gita, Bhagavatam, and association, and then devotees who living as shastras and know shastras. And also explained that that we are trying to find happiness, but we cannot find happiness, and that's why you explained that verse of 522. That if this wise person is not taken into source of misery, they arrive contact material senses, and then there's a beginning and end. So, and also you explained us that the misery is, like Prabhupada said, the gap between the two miseries, that small time is happiness. So material is full of miseries, and it is temporary. So we have to work, but we should not attach the renounce it. So, and also he explained about how the Janak Maharaj given a brilliant example of how he is balanced it, maintaining the kingdom, and also Krishna consciousness. They are showing an example to the yogis. Then he also explained that the verses 18.56 to 18.60 as giving that that all are related to Krishna act of work with the pure devotion service. Like in 56, devotees engage all kind of activities, and Krishna assures us he'll protect. In 57, all activities depend on him, and then work under my protection. 58, a result of working with such consciousness, pass all obstacles. And 59, giving to Arjuna what is their duty to fight. And 60 is that in result of not following the order. So he also explained very beautifully about that the false ego, we are our material body and material kind, which is like mix of an all in water, and then nature controls the body. And then what is our, it's a subtle feature of inferior energy, and I'm the doer, I'm this body. So, and you also explained us that how these three modes in the false ego, with goodness, passion, ignorance, as interact with the mind and our knowledge acquiring senses and the physical senses. So finally, you explained that ultimately the bhakti yoga is the only way to achieve it. So in the devotion of the service under the guidance of spiritual master, we put a false ego, and then our modes are not affected. So we need to take out I, me, myself, and put Krishna center. The only goal is to Krishna, please Krishna. So I gave a brilliant examples of Jayananda Prabhu, and also the Azamil, Arjuna, and Dhruva Maharaj. So those are all practicing a pure devotion service and following the Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, our our modes will affect, and then false stuff may fall out. So thank you very much, Mataji, for giving us a wonderful class. Thank you, Prabhu.
So thank you very much, Ram Prabhu, for nicely summarizing. So with that, we'll do a quick announcement, Radha Prabhu, quickly, and we'll do Narshing Arati. Today will be done by Gopal. Go ahead, Radha Prabhu.
Okay, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna devotees, we had one birthday this week of Nitesh Prabhu. So let's chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra 3 times for the benefit of Nitesh Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, one special announcement we have is we have a Bhagavad-Gita class starting, 6-week seminar starting for new people. Anyone can join. From June 4th, every Friday, from 6 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. I'd request all the devotees to pass on this message to your family and friends, and please ask them to register for the program. And if you have any questions, please ask Rohini Mataji or Rani Mataji or JayaSubhadra Mataji. All right. Besides that, we have Ekadashi coming this Saturday, and please try to fast. Please try to refrain from taking grains or beans that day. Hare Krishna. That's all.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Gopal, can you unmute and... Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Don't play this.
Namaste Narasaya.
विघ्न विनाशक नरसिम्हा भगवान की
जय
प्रहलाद महाराज की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय
Jai. Very nice. Gopal, thank you very much for nicely singing the song. Thank you, Lalita Kun Mataji, for supporting and Mridanga. Hare Krishna. Devotees will stop here and thank you very much for joining and have a wonderful Krishna conscious week. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.